Code arc finally announced in the anime, I thought it would be fun to rank all of the chapters in it so far. While the beginning of this chapter is the end of the Kawaki arc, the ending of it basically starts the Code arc. We get introduced to Code, see the Otsutsuki will passed on, and get to see what the Otsutsuki god looks like. It's a decent chapter. B tier. Boruto and Kawaki try to devise a plan to implant their karma on someone else, while we learn about Code's backstory from Amado. Code engages Boro's cult members, and we get to see how overpowered his abilities are. I'm expecting it to be a pretty good fight in the anime since it is the main villain's introduction. I enjoyed this chapter, but there are plenty in this arc that are much better. B tier. Code awakens Ada this chapter, which is pretty cool, but it's mainly exposition about her abilities. Meanwhile, Naruto meets with the 5 Kage to talk about Code and Boruto's karma, where he's asked the infamous question of whether or not he can kill his own son. But most of this chapter is just about Ada's ability, which is a bit boring. C tier. This chapter picks the action back up. It's a nice sparring match amongst Team 7, which should be decent when the anime adapts it. This is where Kawaki's next character arc begins, as he learns he's become too reliant on the karma and starts desiring more strength. Again, this chapter is pretty good, but nothing amazing. B tier. Chapter 59 starts out really good with a flashback of young Kawaki and Code fighting each other. Then Amado starts trying to manipulate Kawaki's desire for another karma, even blatantly telling Kawaki he can give him his karma back. We're also introduced to Damon and his absolutely ridiculous ability, with another fight against Boro's guards. When it first came out, this chapter felt pretty boring, but after knowing what happens later and how important it is, I actually have a newfound respect for it. B tier. This chapter teases Delta's return and shows some super wholesome scenes of Kawaki bonding with the Uzumaki family. Naruto finds Kawaki out late and literally carries him on his shoulder back home for dinner. Even so, Kawaki starts to feel like he doesn't belong in the village anymore. It's a fun chapter, but really lacks any substantial content. C tier. This chapter is kind of boring in my opinion. Kawaki learns to erase his chakra signature and runs from the village without detection. The only one who can really tell his shadow clone is fake is Boruto. I mean, at least it gets the plot moving for once. C tier. Ada helps Code find Kawaki and they engage in a fight. Meanwhile, Boruto and Naruto frantically try to find Kawaki in the village. Eventually, the chapter ends with Boruto joining the fight alongside Kawaki by tracking his chakra in the forest. I actually really love this chapter and how menacing Code comes off as a villain. A tier. I love the interactions between Boruto and Code here. The dialogue between them is hilarious, and Code flexing on Boruto is exactly what I was hoping for from an antagonist. We learn a lot about the karma's abilities, and it ends with Boruto finally awakening true essence karma. Definitely a favorite of mine. A tier. This is where it all starts to fall apart for Code. Boruto actually keeps up with him and is almost beating him, which is an insane feat. Kawaki helps a bit too, which is cool. Meanwhile, Naruto charges up Sage Mode and Shikamaru decides to go with him to fight Code. There's also some really cool looking panels throughout the chapter too. Really good chapter from start to finish. A tier. Borushiki chapters are always badass, but I think this one has to be my favorite yet. The pure power they show in these panels is just crazy to me. Momoshiki stops time, takes over Boruto's body, and starts completely obliterating the forest and anything in his path in order to kill Code. The iconic Rasendan, Borushiki trickery, and Kawaki's karma finally awakening cements this chapter as one of my all-time favorites. S tier. What a chapter. Okay, so Kawaki and Boruto's karma designs look so damn clean, and their fight is probably one of the best in the series. Kawaki is able to use all of Ishiki's abilities and gives Borushiki a beatdown. And I can't forget about that ending. I mean, what a crazy plot twist. We learn that they had a secret plan this whole arc to get rid of Boruto's karma by literally killing him. There are some badass panels this chapter, and I can't wait to see what they look like animated. S tier chapter. This one was an emotional ride. The stark contrast between Naruto's utter shock at the lifeless body in front of him and Kawaki's absolutely menacing assault on Code made for a great dynamic. Kawaki was on demon time here, and it required some last second strategy from Code to even escape alive. And what I loved about Naruto is how he stayed true to his values, always seeing the good in people no matter what. The ending was also pretty cool, although I'm disappointed they didn't do more with Boruto's death before reviving him so quickly. There was a lot more potential there than they used. So for that, I'm gonna put it in A tier. Shikamaru really stepped up this chapter for sure, calling out Amado on his bullshit while simultaneously luring Code in a trap. If it weren't for Delta being so utterly useless, his plan would have been a success. I like that this chapter ensured the pacing didn't go back to a crawl before the forest fight, and it was honestly pretty fun to read. The only issue is that the first half was a recap with really not much content. B tier. This chapter was pretty wild. From Delta flashing Ada to Sarada crushing on Boruto, plus Ada being oddly flirtatious with Shikamaru and simping for Kawaki, it was really strange to see in the Boruto manga, but I have to admit it was a lot of fun to read through. This chapter really let Ada shine, and I admittedly started to like her as a character a lot more after reading it. B tier. So Amado felt slightly out of character this chapter, but Code and Ada made up for it. I'm a big fan of Code's unlimited character design, but the reveal itself was anticlimactic to say the least. They could have done a much better job in my opinion, and I'm hoping the anime improves it. C tier. I know people hate Damon, but you can't help but smile as he completely wipes the floor with Code. This cocky little kid is a menace to society, I swear. The betrayal helps characterize both Code and Damon a lot more, and I'd have to say it's one of my favorite chapters in the arc. A tier. The designs for Ada and Damon in their snow coats is perfect. I actually can't get over how cute they look. Then Momoshiki's prophecy begins and Code builds a literal army of 10-tail clones. There's a lot to enjoy about this chapter. That being said, it really wasn't worth the wait coming off the back of a month-long hiatus in July. B tier. I'm gonna say, this chapter is not good. Ri's readers get completely blueballed, since not only is the new mission lame as hell, but the entire chapter is practically a recap of events and details we already know. There are a few funny moments, but overall it just feels like a waste of time. D tier. This is probably one of the funniest chapters I've read in the manga so far. I mean, that bar isn't very high, but I'll give credit where credit is due. We also get some big hints as to Ada and Damon's origins, and the long forgotten side characters get a bit of involvement too. Damon attacking people out of nowhere is a little annoying, but I guess I should just expect that from him at this point. B tier. This was probably the most hype non-fight related chapter of the arc. We get just bombshell after bombshell from Amado as he reveals his backstory, daughter, a new Otsutsuki, the origins of ninjutsu, and how he creates cyborgs. The amount of lore they managed to pack into a single chapter was awesome, and I wish the manga dropped stuff like this more often. And I can't forget about that crazy ending where Boruto glimpses into the future and can see what looks like Sage Mode Mitsuki and Kawaki fighting 1v1. Super hyped for that. S tier chapter. Damon and Boruto's interactions this chapter were hilarious. I love the two of them together. It was definitely a lot slower paced this chapter, and more fan service than anything, but I still enjoyed the comedy bits for the most part. It was also great to see Sarada and Samir involved in the plot for once, and set them up as an actual counter to Ada's ability, which is pretty cool. B tier. And there you have it. That's my Code Arc manga chapter tier list so far. The Code Arc will begin in the anime starting February 2023. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll definitely make more content covering it in the future. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching.